If you've ever been exposed to any sort of spiritual teachings or spiritual practices or spiritual books or whatever, and even if you haven't, you might have heard something before along the lines of you have to kill your ego or the ego is the enemy. And I'm here to tell you today that it's not. And I'm not going to act like I know everything about the ego and I'm some spiritual guru or anything like that. But this was something that I was grappling with, like a problem that I never thought I would have. And it was like one of the things that I just could never figure out, because I started getting into like meditation a couple years ago, and that kind of led to me kind of going down just this like a spiritual path, I guess you could call it. And eventually, I had my spiritual awakening, and this was a pretty big deal for me because I'd never experienced anything like this before in my life. I don't really know how to explain it, but I heard somebody talk about how when this happens, it's like you put on the magic glasses and you start to see things. You don't see the world as it's supposed to be. You see it as it is. And I mean, I never really knew much about the ego. When I thought of the term ego, I just thought of, someone with a big ego who is just very full of themselves and very, might be, I don't know, overconfident or potentially narcissistic. But when I think of the ego now, I just think of the letter I. Like whenever I say I just said it right there. That is what I think the ego is. It's your self-perception, how you view yourself. But as I went further and further down this path, I would hear more and more people talk about the ego and how you should break free from having any desires, or I think the essence of spirituality as a whole is just becoming content with the present moment and not thinking about the past or the future too much, but being able to stay present and appreciate the present moment right now. I think what got driven into my head was that I cannot have any desires. Whenever I felt the desire or I wanted to go do something that was potentially ambitious or anything like that, I would feel guilty because I'd hear all these people that they would almost talk down on me. If I would mention anything along the lines of, I want to do this, I want to do that, I have any sort of big goal that I might mention, I had people that were, supposed to be spiritual experts, like almost talking down on me saying, oh, no, that's the ego. I don't know, like it was almost like I felt bad for having goals. And I was like, this is not right. Not having goals just seemed so ridiculous to me. It just never ever sat with me. I could never really accept this. And it was like, no matter how much I meditated, no matter how many, spiritual books that I read, that was the one thing I just could never come to terms with. And I realize now that like I don't have to, and that's not the way that I'm going to operate in this world. I just can't do it. And I think when most people say kill your ego or your ego is the enemy, I think what most people are talking about, again, I'm not any sort of spiritual expert, but they're talking about the ego, the part of the ego that makes you potentially not humble or overconfident or narcissistic, whatever. But I think the part, like not having any sort of desires or any sort of goals, that does not align with human experience. We have egos, our sense of I, our self-perception, that is there for a reason. And like anything, if it can get out of control if it's not handled properly. But anything with the power, like the ego is one of the most powerful forces in the entire world. You think of any sort of historical achievement, many of them were driven by people who had massive egos. Many big athletes, entrepreneurs, all sorts of people, they would not have got to where they are without some sort of ego, telling them and pushing them and driving them every single day because they feel like they have something to live up to, right? I always thought it was funny how, when you see an athlete, talking about they won a championship or something and they thank God, it's always the people that work the hardest that give all their glory to God. And I begin to think about this a lot because it almost seems like the glory or God's will comes out through us, and it comes out through our own willpower. He gives us the power, or she, or whatever, the universe, whatever you believe in, gives us the power to work through anything. And that's what I feel like drives so many people. And the ego, lots of the time as well, is that voice in your head that will tell you that you can't do something. It will tell you, it'll come up with reasons why what you're trying to do is too scary, it's too risky, it'll give you a bunch of reasons why you cannot do things. And I think that is another thing that you can use to your advantage, because if something scares you or if something makes you anxious, you have the power to kind of dive deep into it and figure out why it makes you anxious or why it makes you scared. But then you also have the power to overcome that, because it's like this little voice in your head is going to be talking to you all the time. It's never going to turn off until you almost like acknowledge it and accept it, that it's just like, it's like a roommate. Your little voice in your head is like a roommate. It's like, it doesn't, you're not identifying with it. You don't identify with, you're not your roommate. You can hear your roommate talking, but you're not your roommate. Whatever they say is not the absolute truth. So if that little voice in your head is telling you whatever, it's like, you don't have to listen. But it is okay to have desires. It is okay to have goals. It is okay to feel really good about yourself and feel confident in your ability to do anything. I feel like that is something that you absolutely need, and you should never, ever, ever try to get rid of. Yes, your ego can be the enemy if it gets too big, if it gets out of control, if it, if you start doing things for absolutely no reason just because you feel like you're just above everybody else. Okay, then I understand that. But there's the ego, you can think of it as like a little fire or a big fire. If your ego is humongous and it's big and it's taking control, it's like your entire body, everything around you is going to burn. But if you have it like a little candle that's just guiding you along whatever path you're taking, that is what gives you direction. Because if you have no voice to listen to, if you have no kind of inner, like nothing inside of you that's telling you what you want to do and where you want to go, you're not going to go anywhere. Because again, I think it's very important to be content in the present moment and be able to find happiness in the present moment and not think about the past or the future too much. But you can also do that in tandem with pursuing goals and driving yourself towards things that you want to achieve. And it's like you have that ego, you have those desires for a reason. They're not just there randomly. You don't have those so that you can get rid of them. It doesn't make any sense, right? Like, you have things that you want, and that's perfectly normal. That's fine. You don't have to kill that part off of yourself just because somebody said that's the best way to live your life. There are principles, like in spirituality in general, just overall, that you don't have to apply to your life right now if you're not ready for it. I mean, if you're not trying to become enlightened like at the age of 22 or 23 or even younger, it's like, I mean, you can go ahead and do that, but do that once you're done living the life that you want to live. Once you fulfill those desires, you can stay humble, you can appreciate the present moment, you can stay full of gratitude while also just doing the things that you know you need to do, the things that you want to do, and fulfilling those desires. There's a balance. You don't have to kill off that part of yourself. And it's the same with those little voices in your head. You don't have to kill that part off of yourself. You're still going to have thoughts that might not be the best. They might not serve you. But again, you don't have to listen to them. It's just like a little roommate. You don't have to identify with them. And again, I don't have anything against any sort of spiritual practices or any spiritual texts or spirit, whatever. I think those are great, and I have been exposed to a lot of them, and they have changed my life for the better. But you can be content with the present moment while also understanding that you have the power to change it. And if you know this present moment can improve, if you can make it that present moment better than it is now, why wouldn't you do that? Right? You don't have to just accept it as it is just because you're content in the present moment. But I really just wanted to make this video because I know there's going to be some young people who are on the spiritual path, and they are probably going to run into this problem or this dilemma at some point. And so I just kind of wanted to share my thoughts on this and just let people know that it is okay to feel good about yourself, feel confident in yourself, and have goals that you want to achieve. But again, stay humble, of course. Don't pretend that you are somebody you're not. Don't try and act like you're better than everybody else. But you can have that self-confidence, that drive, and you can push after things that you want. And that's perfectly okay. That's what I want everybody to do. You don't have to kill your ego. Your ego is not your enemy. It is your friend, and you must train it and use it well. Or else, it could potentially get out of control, like any sort of wild friend or anything like that. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that kind of made sense. I just wanted to share some of my experiences with just spirituality and living life in general, and kind of the things that come along with it. So until next time, peace out.